King Charles just received the most dangerous message of his reign. A demand from the British public that could either save his reign or dismantle it entirely. This all started with a simple banner on a highway that read, "Charles, do your job. Fire these traitors." In the blink of an eye, this message went viral, sparking a constitutional firestorm. Now, millions of people are calling for something unimaginable, for their king to disband Parliament and force a new election. If you're curious about how this incredible situation is unfolding, hit that subscribe button, because this story is evolving by the minute. What's happening is that British citizens are leveraging an almost forgotten constitutional power. The monarch has the authority, in extreme circumstances, to dissolve Parliament. And a growing number of people believe those extreme circumstances are here. The data speaks for itself. Over the last 2 years, the cost of living has surged by 23%. Net migration has hit a record high of 764,000 in 2025. Meanwhile, public trust in Parliament has plummeted to an all-time low of just 19%. What's truly astounding is that King Charles has the legal authority to intervene. The royal prerogative grants him powers that haven't been invoked since the 1970s. He can dissolve the government, mandate new elections, and effectively bypass the political system. The real question isn't whether he can act, but whether he will. Protests are sweeping across the country, from Manchester to Cardiff, all echoing the same demand: dissolve Parliament now. This isn't just a fringe movement, it's a groundswell of ordinary people, families, workers, pensioners, who feel completely let down by their elected leaders. Social media is ablaze. The hashtag dissolve Parliament has been a top trend for nearly a week. Videos on platforms like TikTok advocating for the King's intervention have accumulated over 50 million views. Even some traditional supporters of the monarchy are joining in, arguing that these extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. Charles, however, is caught in an impossible bind. If he acts, he could spark the most significant constitutional crisis since the English Civil War. The political establishment would label him a dictator, international allies would question Britain's stability, and the media would turn on him. But if he does nothing, something potentially worse could happen: the monarchy could lose all its legitimacy. What good is a king who stands by and does nothing when his people are desperate? Recent polls underscore the gravity of the situation. A staggering 43% of Britons now support the king dissolving Parliament, a number that rises to 67% among working-class voters. Even more alarming, 38% of people say they would support abolishing the monarchy entirely if Charles fails to act. This is a crossroads his mother, Queen Elizabeth, never had to face. She reigned during an era of relative stability. King Charles is now forced to choose between deeply rooted tradition and a potential revolution. The pressure is mounting from all sides. Privately, some conservative members of Parliament are reportedly panicking, with some even considering whether early elections would be preferable to a royal intervention. Labour politicians have dismissed the movement as anti-democratic, but their own approval ratings have also hit historic lows. International observers are watching with bated breath. Constitutional experts warn that if Charles dissolves Parliament, it could set a dangerous precedent for other constitutional monarchies worldwide. The global ripple effects could redefine modern democracy. However, supporters of the movement argue that Britain is already in a state of crisis, with a failing economy, social unrest, and a complete breakdown of trust. For them, the traditional political system has failed, and only the crown can restore order. The timeline is critical. While the current parliamentary term is set to run until 2029, political insiders suggest the government's position is becoming increasingly fragile. Internal rebellions are growing, and some MPs are openly speculating that early elections are unavoidable. This makes Charles's decision even more crucial. If he waits too long, he risks appearing indecisive. If he acts too soon, he could be seen as reckless. The window for a meaningful intervention is closing fast. History offers little guidance. The last time a British monarch dissolved Parliament against the government's wishes was in 1834. That crisis lasted for months and permanently altered the relationship between the Crown and Parliament. Charles's decision could have similarly profound consequences. What happens next rests entirely on one man. He could remain silent, hoping the crisis fades away. He could issue statements urging calm. Or he could take the most drastic step of any modern British monarch. The clock is ticking. The banner on that motorway was just the beginning. Now, the entire nation is watching, waiting for their king to decide who he truly serves, the political establishment or the people who still believe in the crown. Sources close to Buckingham Palace indicate that Charles is deeply concerned and is consulting with legal experts. But concern alone won't solve a constitutional crisis, only action will. The monarchy has survived for over 1,000 years by adapting to new circumstances. Queen Victoria faced her own pressures during the Irish Home Rule crisis, navigating them with royal influence without a full-blown constitutional crisis. However, Charles's predicament may be more severe. Victoria had a working political system. Charles faces a parliament that many of his subjects now consider illegitimate. The legal arguments are complex but clear. While the Fixed-Term Parliaments Act of 2011 transferred the power to dissolve Parliament to Parliament itself, constitutional lawyers argue that in extreme cases, especially if Parliament loses public confidence, the royal prerogative could be reasserted. This legal ambiguity is precisely what makes the situation so volatile. Charles would not just be making a political choice, he would be establishing a new constitutional interpretation that could redefine British democracy for generations. Behind the palace doors, the royal household is divided. Traditionalists urge caution, fearing that any intervention would shatter the political neutrality the monarchy has maintained for decades. Younger advisors, however, argue that inaction in a time of crisis is itself a political choice, one that could prove fatal to the institution they are sworn to protect. The economic fallout is already significant. The British pound has dropped 3% since the calls for dissolution began trending. International investors are on edge, remembering the instability of the Liz Truss government in 2022. But economic uncertainty pales in comparison to the potential social upheaval. If Charles dissolves Parliament, it could trigger the largest constitutional crisis in centuries. If he refuses, he risks a complete collapse of faith in the very institutions that hold the nation together. The international implications are immense. A British monarch dissolving Parliament would send shockwaves across the globe. Markets would panic, allies would question Britain's stability, and adversaries would see an opportunity in the chaos. Yet, doing nothing carries its own risks. A monarchy that is seen as weak and irrelevant serves no purpose. If Charles cannot or will not act when his people need leadership, then what is the point of the crown in modern Britain? This moment will define Charles's entire reign. History will remember him not for his ceremonies or speeches, but for this single decision. Will he be remembered as the king who saved British democracy, or the monarch who watched it crumble? The pressure is now coming from every corner of society. Military veterans have started organizing rallies in support of royal intervention, arguing that their oath is to the crown, not Parliament. Major General Sir Richard Barron, a former Joint Forces commander, recently stated that constitutional duty sometimes demands extraordinary measures. Over 15,000 former service members have signed a petition backing dissolution. Even some trade unions, traditionally Republican, are divided. The GMB Union's General Secretary, Gary Smith, stated that Parliament has completely lost touch with working families. Religious leaders are also weighing in. While the Archbishop of Canterbury has called for constitutional wisdom, sources suggest he has privately told Charles that extraordinary times may require extraordinary measures. The Catholic Archbishop Malcolm McMahon was more direct, suggesting on BBC Radio 4 that when democracy fails the people, other constitutional mechanisms must be considered. The business community is similarly split. The Confederation of British Industry, CBI, officially opposes dissolution, but smaller business groups are breaking ranks. The Federation of Small Businesses released a poll showing that 71% of its members support early elections, arguing that Parliament no longer represents British enterprise. Regional political leaders are adding to the fire. Scottish First Minister Humza Yousaf called the movement concerned for democracy, but his own approval ratings have fallen to a historic low of just 28%. Welsh First Minister Mark Drakeford took a more measured approach, acknowledging that constitutional conventions exist for exceptional circumstances. The media landscape has become a battleground. Mainstream news outlets are largely critical of the dissolution movement, warning of instability and chaos. The BBC's political editor has labeled it dangerous populism. But social media tells a different story. Independent content creators are reaching millions with videos supporting royal intervention, often outperforming traditional media by huge margins. A YouTube channel called Constitutional Crisis UK gained 2.3 million subscribers in just 2 weeks. This digital divide mirrors a deeper societal rift. The old establishment, the political class and traditional media, is largely against dissolution. But the people, the voters who feel ignored and betrayed, are increasingly united in their call for the king to act. The geographic and demographic divides are also revealing. Support for dissolution is lower in London and the South East, but consistently exceeds 60% across the Midlands, the North, and Wales. In former industrial towns like Sunderland and Blackpool, it climbs to over 75%. Younger voters, often more Republican, are surprisingly behind the movement, viewing royal intervention as a way to dismantle a broken system. Polls show 52% of Gen Z voters support dissolution, a higher percentage than any previous generation at their age. The international reaction has been one of concern. The White House has issued a statement of support for the democratic traditions of our closest ally, while privately expressing deep concern about potential chaos. Commonwealth leaders are watching closely, with some in Canada and Australia worried that a successful royal intervention in Britain could spark similar calls in their own countries. Financial markets reflect this global uncertainty. British government bond yields have spiked to levels not seen since the Liz Truss crisis, and the FTSE 100 has dropped 7%. Billions are being pulled from British assets as investors fear political instability. However, some economists argue that a constitutional reset could ultimately restore investor confidence more effectively than a prolonged period of parliamentary gridlock. Legal challenges are being prepared on both sides. Constitutional lawyers supporting dissolution are arguing that Parliament's loss of public trust has revived dormant royal prerogatives. Anti-dissolution groups are preparing counterarguments that any royal intervention would violate modern principles. The Supreme Court could soon face the most significant constitutional case in British history. Palace sources confirm that Charles is seeking counsel from constitutional experts from across the Commonwealth. The former Governor-General of Australia, Sir Peter Cosgrove, recently flew to London for private meetings. These consultations highlight the global implications of Charles's choice. Other monarchs are watching nervously, knowing that his decision could set a precedent for constitutional monarchies around the world. The decision is imminent. Political sources suggest Charles will make a statement within days. His choice will either calm the storm or unleash forces that could forever change Britain. The pressure is immense, the choice is impossible, but he must choose. The fate of the monarchy and British democracy hangs in the balance. This is the most critical constitutional moment in living memory, and we are all witnessing it unfold. What do you think Charles should do? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more in-depth political commentary, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the world of power and politics. Thanks for watching.